Okay, so in entertainment, there's this acronym, EGOT. Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, Tony. Each the peak award in their respective industries. They cover television, music, film, and theater. But there's a massive field missing. Books. But no one cares about books, so we'll talk about video games instead. Why don't we see ads on ABC promoting the hell out of the Gamies next Sunday after Blackish? Or I guess for gamers, they'd probably prefer a different lead-in show, but the point is that gaming is completely isolated from the rest of the awards industry. Like most of the above industries, there's hundreds of different gaming award shows, mostly held by industry publications or critics groups. They all differ in various ways, but the big thing is that there isn't really a clear definitive leader of the pack, at least not historically. There's no initial to tack onto the end of EGOT. You've got the BAFTA Game Awards, the Game Developers' Choice Awards, the Golden Joystick Awards. There's a lot of these. Now, that's not to say that some awards aren't worth more than others. From 2003 to 2013, Spike TV would broadcast the Spike Video Game Awards, or VGAs. They were produced by Jeff Keighley, gaming's answer to Chris Hardwick. They had a live audience, a host, people coming to the stage and giving acceptance speeches, basically emulating the presentation you'd expect from mainstream awards ceremonies, often too directly. The VGAs were filled with appearances and performances from celebrities who had nothing to do with video games. Spike wasn't super confident about devoting a large time slot to awarding video games, so sometimes they'd lean on the ratings draw of an unsolicited Kid Rock performance. Also, tons of in-show ads. And in keeping with the perceived demographics of the gamer audience, the whole ceremony pandered to what Spike executives thought the average 14-year-old boy liked. Their trophy is literally a monkey smoking a cigarette. It's the epitome of LOL so random XD. But by virtue of being pretty much the only one that was aired on actual TV, the VGAs were arguably the most prominent gaming award show for the decade they existed. It wasn't likely to make it onto any game covers, but it was the only one where Matt Groening can give a speech thanking EA while women in Simpsons-themed bodysuits pose near him. But after some retooling, Spike canned the ceremony, and left gamers with no reason to switch their TV's input out of whichever port their PlayStation was plugged into. Jeff Keighley, having lost his job, realized there was a power vacuum for a primary video game award show. So he pulled his money together to found and host The Game Awards. That's what it's called, The Game Awards. And I'd be comfortable calling it the current leader of the pack, but that's just... Can we talk about that name? Like, I get that the name is supposed to make it definitive, like it's The Game Awards, but that doesn't really work when it's 2014 and you're jumping into an industry that is filled with apparently hundreds of indistinguishable game awards. Anyway, the Game Awards exist and apparently are popular enough that TV networks have offered to broadcast them, but they just don't. But it doesn't seem to matter how successful they are because the games industry still won't recognize a leader. Just look at how games market the awards they win. There's this concept of the Game of the Year edition, where a sufficiently well-reviewed game is re-released, touting itself to be the winner of the year. They almost never name a specific awards association and usually just boast that it won a ton of Game of the Year awards. This means that several games can lay claim to Game of the Year in the same year. You can't really do this in other industries. Like, if you saw a poster for The Ranch that said, over 200 Best Comedy Series awards, you might wonder just where the hell these awards are coming from. So why are games so unique in the awards industry? Why don't they fit nicely into the EGOT format like the rest of our entertainment? Well, part of the problem is the lack of identifiable people and their contributions. The awards industry is, at its basest form, a competition between individuals, and their work is divided into categories representing the different aspects of an art form. The Oscar for Best Costume Design makes sense. You can watch Moulin Rouge win the award, and then you can watch the movie and go, damn, those are some wild costumes. But video games don't have intuitive categories like that. The majority of categories at your typical gaming award shows are just variations of Game of the Year split by genre or platform. The Game Awards, designed to be the Oscars for video games, includes Best Mobile Game, Best Indie Game, Best Ongoing Game, Best VR/AR Game, Best Action Game, Best Action Adventure Game. Yes, those are two different categories, and there's like 7 more of these. They have a few that make sense, like Best Score in Music or Best Art Direction. There's the Best Performance category, which you'd think is a straightforward acting award, but it's a bit reductive given that motion capture performances are the work of sometimes dozens of designers carefully crafting messy data into something that looks good, and not just an actor wearing funny dots. And then there are categories like Most Anticipated Game, which is for games that aren't even out yet. There's Content Creator of the Year, which is for people who make content about games in general. It's very clear that there was a struggle to identify categories by which games should be awarded. So now think about how one experiences a movie, a song, a TV show, a play. You just sit and watch it, right? There's no challenge in actually consuming the media. And everyone experiences the same thing, for the most part. But if you're playing video games and you take a left turn and discover a secret area, but your friend goes right and misses it, neither of you played it wrong. And over the course of a game, you're making thousands of decisions and paving your own experience. So every single awards voter is basically voting on their own slightly unique version of a game. It's also incredibly difficult for a voter to play all of the games in contention. A film or play can be viewed in under 3 hours most of the time, albums are much shorter, and individual songs can be binged easily. Even television, the longest format of all the EGOT awards, is at least broken into episodes. In fact, the Emmys only consider a 6-episode sample to represent a season of TV. But there's almost never a simple way to break a game into a sample, and there's no universal standard for the point at which a game is beaten. Is it achieving 100% of the side quests and objectives? Is it simply completing the story? What if it doesn't have a story? Do difficulty settings make a difference? In most games, doing the absolute minimum that can be considered completion will still involve hours and hours of commitment. And that's not to mention that the amount of content in a game is often considered a point of critique, and this is usually measured in how many hours it takes to beat. This is a fairly large issue in games journalism as well. But this is where a certain type of game emerges as king of awards. The Oscar bait of games, if you will, is one that strips away these choices to ensure that you're getting the most out of the game. These games are typically shooters and/or adventure games with a heavy emphasis on cutscenes, graphics, and anything that can be described as cinematic. If you're a developer putting hundreds of millions of dollars and an army of programmers chained to their desks for a 6-year development cycle, giving players choices is a liability. Think about it this way. In a TV series, the cost of including background details and subtle foreshadowing is negligible. In video games, bonus content means a significant sum of money being put into material that not everyone is going to discover. The Last of Us doesn't necessarily win awards because it's the best video game. It wins awards because it's the most focused, singular experience. In other words, it wins because you can experience it as easily as you can experience a movie. That's not to say that less linear or less cinematic or even multiplayer games can't win Game of the Year awards. They certainly can. There's like 500 Game of the Year awards and they can't all go to Assassin's Creed, but they face an uphill battle. The soundtrack to the film Oh Brother, Where Art Thou winning the Grammy for Album of the Year doesn't mean that pop albums don't still have a huge advantage. And then there's the profit-motivated side of it all. Awards marketing usually exists as a means of gathering prestige for a certain studio, brand, or just to boost the revenue of a specific work. When Green Book wins Best Picture, it gets a box office bump, and its producers get a trophy to put on their resume. But do video games get the same bump? Without a video game award show piercing through to the general public, it's hard to say. Many of these shows involve partial or complete fan voting, so the awards usually just directly reflect what's already popular. You're unlikely to have never heard of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, then found out it won Game of the Year at the Game Awards, and then go buy it. So what's the incentive for this industry to even support an awards season? Ultimately, video games are their own beast, and while they can share elements of nearly all art forms that came before them, they aren't recognized and divided into the universally understood levels of prestige that we see in film, music, television, and theater. They are a relatively young art form, and perhaps we'll see a transition into a more formalized award structure in the future. Or maybe we won't. Games don't fit nicely into a yearly season, they don't provide a universal experience, and their components don't divide well into categories. So maybe it's time to completely rethink the way we award video games.